Welcome to Compound Insights, a podcast by CFA Society New York. I'm your host, Rob Rowan. Today we're cutting through the AI hype and finding out how investment professionals are actually using it. Our guest today is Amit Singh. He is the global head of GTM and use cases for generative AI and machine learning partners at AWS. Prior to this role, Amit led business development for machine learning partnerships at AWS. He has also previously worked at Microsoft as business strategy leader for data and AI customer success unit and was director of GTM strategy and operations for the financial and risk business unit, which is now part of the London Stock Exchange Group at Thomson Reuters. He holds an MBA from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and he got his undergraduate degree in tech and electronics and communication engineering in India. So, Amit, thank you for being on the podcast and thanks for coming to talk about these things.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, so I'd like to start at a very broad level, but something that's delivers on the first thing I said. How do your customers in investment management use generative AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. Generative AI is finding broad applicability across different industries and verticals and across different functions as such. If we look at investment management, particularly and capital markets, we have customers using generative AI across the trade lifecycle, actually, starting with customer experience. If you think about call center intelligence or personalization, to research. Customers are using generative AI for document processing, Q&A, and data visualization. We also have pre-trade analytics, and customers are using generative AI for things like predictive analytics and estimating transaction costs. Generative AI can also be used in trading, product innovation, risk management, portfolio management, and then, of course, also in compliance and surveillance. I would like to kind of talk about a couple of specific customer examples where customers are using generative AI. For example, NASDAQ, they are using generative AI in anti-financial crime and surveillance. And particularly, they're using some of the AWS services like Amazon Bedrock, which is our flagship service for building custom generative AI applications. So that's one great use case within capital markets more broadly. Our customers like Principal Financial are using generative AI, specifically post-call analytics solution. And this enables their customer service agents to focus most of their time and resources in engaging customers rather than actually doing manual work after the call is completed. Those are a couple of examples. We have a few more, particularly the case of Bridgewater, where they have built investment analyst assistant. And this again is built on top of Amazon Bedrock, and they're using foundation models from Anthropic, which is one of the leading foundation model provider out there. What they have done is they have created this investment analyst assistant to really help their investment analysts to kind of focus most of their time doing more value-added work. So analysts used to spend a lot of time writing code or using software to create charts and tables. And Bridgewater wanted to leverage generative AI to produce these charts and tables based on natural language query posed by the analyst. So they created this flexible solution, which will help them remove these mundane activities and help the analysts focus most of their effort on research process. And this enables their analysts to spend more time on difficult and differentiated aspects of understanding markets and economies rather than doing routine tasks. This also democratizes the data analysis across their organization, wherein previously the analysts used to rely on more technical folks to kind of do this work. Now they can do this using natural language query. So those are some of the examples where generative AI is being used across investment management space by AWS customers.
Okay, those are all really interesting and a nice way to start with the waterfront. I'd like to drill into the regulatory activities that we all have to go through, which for many firms have grown substantially in their time consumption over the last 20 years. So, how are people using AI to reduce the time that firms need to spend to comply with regulatory activities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I'll talk about this through a couple of customer examples again. So line data, they have investment compliance process for asset managers, which involves scanning investment management agreements and relevant regulations. And they identify key terms and create onboarding and monitoring rules. So, and line data, what they wanted to do was they wanted to automate this entire flow. So yeah, Line Data collaborated with AWS Generative AI Innovation Center, and they built a chat interface that used foundation models to answer compliance user questions. And this solution makes it easier and faster for them to onboard new clients and update existing client investment terms. It automatically extracts key information and assigns relevant rules to client accounts, saving time and resources. The context-supported responses give the team increased confidence in the solution. And faster processing of clients' investment criteria allows portfolio managers to quickly respond to time-sensitive market opportunities and to create value for their clients. The other example I would like to give here is of Verafin. They have since been acquired by Nasdaq. So Verafin processes data from over 3,800 financial institutions consisting of transactions and profiles for over 575 million entities. And as payment volumes and complexity of financial crimes rose, Verafin needed to address inefficiencies and empower their investigators to handle growing workloads. So what Verafin did was built a custom generative AI solution using some of the AWS services. They also used techniques like multi-shot examples and role assignment to get more accurate answers from the prompts that they were providing. So this helped them automate manual tasks. The solution significantly reduced investigator workloads as well as reduced their overall costs on AWS. Some of their customers saw reductions from 60% to just about 5 to 10% of time that they were spending on manual work. And this, of course, as you can imagine, freed up substantial hours for investigators to refocus on analyzing suspicious situations, leading to improvements in efficacy, efficiency, and scale of financial crime prevention capabilities. So those are a couple of examples, particularly in the regulatory setting, as to how generative AI is being used by our customers.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned trust there because we have to trust in the software to uphold the rule of law. Innocent people can't be caught like that. But investment management people in our industry also have to have trust because they stake their careers on the data that comes out of these things. I'm old enough to remember when I had this trepidation about Python because I didn't really know what it was doing with data. So how do you recommend that financial services people build trust in these tools? And I wonder if you think like purpose building help, or what do you think helps them build the confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. I think trust is an important factor, particularly with generative AI, because generative AI is built on top of foundation models, and foundation model output can be non-deterministic, right? And particularly in a space like invested management, where you need some deterministic answers, right? So customers need to have trust when they're kind of building generative AI applications. There are a few ways and approaches I would suggest in terms of how customers can go about doing that. So number one is, of course, you want to start with identifying the right approaches for building generative AI applications, having a good sense of the use cases that you want to focus on and solve through generative AI. I think that's probably the best place to start. You want to understand what are the capabilities that generative AI brings, what are its limitations. For example, the non-deterministic nature of the output, that's one limitation, but it's also one of the key capabilities that generative AI offers. So,
Right, right.
so I would recommend starting with identifying what are the use cases that you can actually solve through this technology. So that's number one. Number two is there are techniques like retrieval augmented generation. And without getting into the technicalities of it, the technique is all about grounding the output, bringing in and solving for some of the challenges, particularly around recency. So connecting the foundation models to your own data sources, and making sure that those data sources are current so that the response that the model provides is grounded in those data sources. So that's kind of the second way in which customers can start to build trust when adopting generative AI. The third is you need to focus on establishing the right governance and compliance. So make sure that as you adopt generative AI, you have a strong governance framework in place. And of course, before even on the governance front, I would highly recommend that customers have a strong data strategy in place and they have the right data quality because ultimately generative AI, just like any other AI for that matter, is powered by data. And if the data is not of great quality, the output of the models will not be what the customers are looking for. So having strong governance framework in place and a strong data strategy and data quality in place really helps as well. The other thing I would say is that to help build trust, place a lot of emphasis around privacy and security. So you want to work with vendors who are prioritizing security and privacy, where security and privacy are actually built into the services that they're offering or the applications that they're offering. And it's not an add-on or an afterthought. So we want to make sure that when you are working with these generative AI capabilities or services, or you're using any foundation models, none of the data that you use, even for prompting these models or getting the output, none of that gets shared with the foundation model provider or the vendor that you're working with. You also want to make sure that the data doesn't get exposed to the foundation model as well as more broadly into the internet, because this is your own proprietary data, your own customer data, and you do not want that going out and getting exposed and getting in the hands of bad actors. So I would highly recommend that you look at and identify vendors that prioritize security and privacy. On the privacy front, just one more thing to kind of maybe add there is you want to have the right access controls in place so that if a particular user is not supposed to be exposed to certain type of data, they are not exposed to that data even when working within a generative AI setting. And then final thing I would say here is really keeping a track of the evolving legal and regulatory landscape because the generative AI is still fairly new. We are, I think, fairly early in terms of the broad scale applicability and adoption of generative AI, and regulation is still evolving. I think the EU AI Act is now applicable because firms have to comply with that regulation, and I would keep an eye on any other regulatory framework that is evolving for AI specifically, and make sure that customers are staying compliant with those regulations.
Well, that list is impressive, but also close to home. I think for a lot of people, many of those tasks are required for every department within a financial services organization. And knowing vendors, knowing the quality of the work, knowing where the weak points are, setting out the business plan at the beginning, expecting things that are expectable from the thing you're building. All those things sound awful familiar to starting, in a new subsector, for instance, or
Absolutely.
starting a new marketing channel. So that I hope everyone who hears that thinks, yeah, I've heard those before. So, so
Yeah.
yeah, so great. Yeah, so if any of you who are listening to this podcast would like to hear more from Amit, you can go on to CFA New York's website and you can download the video recording of his session. He spoke at the Ben Graham event that we had here this year. One word of advice: some of that recording is not the highest of quality. Some of the mics didn't sound great, but Amit's did, so you will be able to hear him clearly. Some of the other people on the panel, maybe not so much, but but that's that. So Amit, thank you for sharing this, exceptionally timely, very important data with our members.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rob, for having me, and it was great chatting with you.
Right. And thank you for listening to this week's podcast. Again, I'm Rob Rowan, and this has been Compound Insights.